You're listening to the Monday Night Community Show with Daniel on BRFM.
So we are joined with Ian Goodwin. Ian, as always, thank you very much for coming along this evening.
Well, good evening, Daniel, and good evening to your listeners. As Daniel can testify, I've been in the wars. I haven't been in a boxing match, but I've got one really cracking black eye.
Yeah.
Having come off my bike this morning on the railway lines, I've bashed it all up. But there you go. And I don't know where summer is, Daniel, but I think it's on its way. Apparently it's supposed to start this weekend, but that's a rumour.
Yeah, it certainly hasn't yet.
Yeah, well, let me just talk a little bit about what I'm here for. I'm talking a little bit about the Maritime and Coastguard Agency. That's an executive agency of the Department of Transport, and the Maritime and Coastguard Agency, or the MCA as I'll shorten it, is responsible throughout the UK for implementing the government's maritime safety policy. Now, that includes coordinating search and rescue at sea through Her Majesty's Coastguard, checking that ships meet UK and international safety rules, and the agency works to prevent the loss of life at sea and along the coast, and to ensure that ships are safe and to prevent coastal pollution. In essence, safer lives, safer ships, cleaner seas. Other aspects are the receiver of wreck, where we're dealing with what we call royal fish, and I'll come on to one of the incidents this evening. Her Majesty's Coastguard is the on-call emergency organisation responsible for the initiation and coordination of all civil maritime search and rescue within the UK Maritime Search and Rescue region. And this includes the mobilisation, organisation and tasking of resources to respond to persons either in distress at sea or to persons at risk or injury at death on the cliffs or to the shorelines in the UK. Now, we also perform another function. We obviously look at searches for people. Sheppey, the team I'm involved in, we actually do mud and cliff rescue as well. And in essence, the Majesty's Coastguard covers somewhere in the region of 10,500 miles of coastline, which is in the UK. And what do I do? Well, I'm actually a volunteer Coast Guard rescue officer, and as I say, we provide the UK's coastal search and rescue capability as part of Her Majesty's Coast Guard, and we can operate separately or jointly with other emergency services. It consists of teams of volunteers, which we call Coast Guard rescue teams. Sheppey happens to be a Coast Guard rescue team, who are drawn from the local community, and we're fully trained and equipped to carry out search and rescue operations around the UK. And as a volunteer of one of these teams, we play, I think, a vital role in helping the Maritime and Coastguard Agency achieve its vision of being a world-class organisation that is committed to preventing loss of life, improving maritime safety and protecting the marine environment.
And Ian, I know you were going to wanted to cover a little bit about your role and what you're doing.
I mean, as a volunteer Coast Guard rescue officer, we can be called out by the Maritime Rescue Coordination Centre, which happens to be based in Thames. Based at Walton-on-the-Naze, at any time, day or night, in all weathers, to respond to those in trouble or missing, to seek confirmation or further information of a report, or to participate in a joint response to an emergency. Now, typical things that we do, Daniel, is we carry out rescues for those trapped or injured on cliffs or in mud, and we also provide a water rescue capability. Now, Sheppey itself, we do cliff, mud, water rescue and search. And if you take all the teams, and there's somewhere in the region of about 300 teams, there's only about 8 of us that actually do all of those competencies, and Sheppey is one of those 8. So, you know, we are, I would say this, I mean, we do all of the rescues and the types of rescues that the Coast Guard carries out. We also carry out searches for missing persons, often in conjunction with the police. We carry out coastal and inshore surveillance and intelligence gathering on behalf of the Maritime Rescue Coordination Centre. We provide emergency mobile communications, including relay and remote radio site operation. We provide incident response and on-scene coordination as required by the Maritime Rescue Coordination Centre. We will report the presence of pollution or other hazardous objects to the shore, to the Maritime Rescue Coordinator. Now, those sort of things can be things like ordnance, a World War II bomb or a Napoleonic War bomb, that sort of things, which we do get our fair share of, torpedoes and everything else on the island. We carry out duties as required by the receiver of wreck. So, for instance, if a whale or a porpoise washes up, and I'll come on to those incidents, we have to actually do some measurements. We have to call the appropriate organisations, most notably the Natural History Museum. We also carry out accident prevention and safety education activities and specifically targeted prevention initiatives. And all of us come from all different walks of life. We're people who have chosen to serve their communities and the public by giving their time, skills and effort willingly and without salary. And I know, if I speak on behalf of all the team, we value this commitment and contribution very highly. You know, I certainly enjoy it. I'm coming up to my 15th year. There's only one person now within the team who's been there longer, and that's Andy Redman. And Andy Redman's coming up in September. We'll be giving a bar to his 20-year service medal, which means he would have done 30 years on service. So Andy, who's the longest serving, has actually done twice as many years as myself, who's now the second longest serving member for the local Coast Guard.
And Ian, I know we're going to go on to cover any useful safety advice for the time.
Yeah, I'll give you some safety advice, general advice. Keep clear of any cliff edges. Certainly our cliff edges are prone to collapsing, as we've seen on the north side of the island, and they can give way underfoot, and we have had to rescue a number of people this year as a result of that. Always swim close to the beach in line with the shore. Don't eat and drink before swimming. You might get cramps when you're in the water. Don't drink alcohol, and going into the sea is dangerous. It slows your reactions, increases your chance of hypothermia, and your judgment of distance will be impaired. Check the weather and tides before you leave home. You won't get swept away. And I don't know if you noticed, but at Laysdown, Minster and at Sheerness there's the new lifeguard huts, which are supported by the RNLI, the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, and they are manned at weekends, and they will be manned during the summer holidays. Wear sun cream. You know, ho ho ho, but at least factor 15 or above, otherwise you're going to get burnt. And if you don't have someone to accompany you, then make sure there are others around you, so if you can get their attention if you get into difficulties. The other thing is about children. It's important for parents to supervise their children at all times and to know where they are. Now, thousands of children are lost every year, but fortunately most are found within a few minutes. Now, do not panic, remain calm, and allow it. If you stay calm, it allows you to be more effective in searching. If you go searching for a lost child, make sure any other children are properly supervised. If you're having real difficulty, then you can always ring 999 and ask for the Coast Guard, and we do come out, but we will require a good description of the individual, and we come out every year to look for missing children, and we do invariably find them in very close proximity, fortunately, to the parents or carers. And always supervise your children on the beach. It's very easy to just get distracted, and a small wave can knock a child over. And sort of real things we do hate is inflatable toys, airbeds and dinghies, but bad use when used at sea. They're much safer in swimming pools. They can blow out away from the shore with the lightest of breezes, and I will absolutely guarantee, Daniel, that this summer we will have a number of incidents with a number of inflatables blown out to sea. So if your child is using inflatables, make sure they're being supervised and that the inflatable is secured to the shoreline, ideally held by an adult, and just remember, can be blown away in the slightest breeze, and always use them between the red and yellow flags, and the lifeguards will give you some further advice. In an emergency, do not chase after the inflatable. Find a lifeguard or call 999 and ask for the Coast Guard. Just take these basic safety advices. Keep away from cliffs, watch the water, watch those tides, watch the wind conditions, and hopefully no inflatables.
And we're going to go over the incidents that the Coast Guard have covered since you were last on air.
Well, certainly. Well, the first one I'd like to talk about is Wednesday the 20th of March, which happened in the afternoon. And we were tasked to shell Ness, which is on the easterly part of the island, following a report of ordnance found on the beach. Now, the officers on this one met with what we call the first informant. That's the person who rings about it. And they located the suspect object. My colleague, Coast Guard Rescue Officer Eamon French, identified the object as the outlet pipe of a saltwater swimming pool. In other words, what we regard this as a false alarm, but with good intent. So the individual, the first informant, genuinely thought it was an issue. And the officers returned to station. On Tuesday, the following week, Sheppey Coastguards were tasked to the Sheerness docks to retrieve a casualty from the Sheerness lifeboat. The casualty was a Russian sailor from a ship moored off Sheppey. The casualty was suffering from abdominal pains and was taken to the Medway Hospital by paramedics. The casualty actually came from Kaliningrad, and I've been there in Russia.
Right.
It's actually the birthplace of Tchaikovsky, and I've actually seen Tchaikovsky's piano, and I even had a go on it. But that's another story, Daniel, of my escapades in Russia, which I won't go on here. Sunday the 25th of March at 10 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night. And this was two of my colleagues. That was Andy, Coast Guard Rescue Officer Andy Redman, and his daughter, Coast Guard Rescue Officer Kirsty Redman. They had to deal with a young humpbacked whale which had been found in the Thames estuary and was actually a hazard to shipping because it was a big old beast, even though he was a young male. I believe it was a young male. I can't remember now. It might have been a female. Anyway, it was towed back to Sheerness docks, and someone came down from the Natural History Museum and cut it all up and examined it to try and find out what had actually caused it to die. And that's part of the procedures that we have to go through. And then the council have to dispose of it, which is easier said than done when you've got a whale of that size. On Saturday the 30th of March at 12 o'clock, we were tasked, and that was myself and the station officer, Nigel Woolley, following a report of a recovery of a dead harbour porpoise. And Nigel and I, we actually recorded various measurements. So we have to measure its beak, its how many teeth, what type of teeth it's got, where its tail, where its dorsal fin is, amongst other things, which I won't go into any great detail on the radio. And but it's not very pleasant, particularly if they've been in the water. But this one was quite fresh, so it wasn't smelling. And later on, the London Zoological Society, basically coming out of London Zoo at Regent's Park, took it away, and they actually carried out an autopsy. I don't actually know the outcome of that autopsy, but again, it would have been to determine what actually killed this particular harbour porpoise. And then on Monday the 1st of April at 4 o'clock in the morning, we were all tasked to assist the police in a search for a despondent male, age 18, in the Minster area. The male had recently split from his girlfriend. It obviously clearly upset him, but he was found safe and well half an hour later.
Continue now, I think, with those incidents that you've covered since the Coast Guard were last on air.
Yeah, well, just finishing off, Daniel, Sunday the 14th of April, we were tasked to two incidents. One involved a small motorboat with a child on board. My colleague and myself, my colleague Kirsty Redman dealt with this one. There was no safety equipment and the craft was totally underpowered, and they were having difficulty getting back on shore, in essence. And there they were, two chaps with a child, no buoyancy aids on, related to the answer to the question I've been given. And as my colleague Kirsty commented, we arrived at Minster Shinglebank and observed two adults recovering a small vessel. A member of the public had reported the craft in difficulty, and there was a child on board with no life jacket. There's another clue to 50, 100, 150 and 275, and the wind conditions and tide conditions combined with the small powered outboard engine had contributed to the craft having difficulties reaching the shore, so we actually passed on relevant safety advice. The other incident was a report of a dog possibly drowning off Royal Oak Point. We do attend to these incidents because invariably the owners try to go and rescue him and they end up drowning. So that's one of the reasons why we respond to that. And the dog actually made it safely to ashore. On Sunday, the 6th of May, we were tasked to laze down following a report of ordnance on the beach at low water. A bomb was located, and my colleagues, Henry Ranger, and I think it was Andy Redman again, or James Crane, placed a marker buoy, and they deployed that, and a Royal Navy bomb disposal team arrived. It was James actually now, and Henry. They arrived in the afternoon, and they actually detonated this device, and it was a grand old spectacular water spout when they blew this up. And finally, at the end of May, on Saturday the 25th of May, the Sheerness inshore lifeboat was launched in the afternoon to a motorboat called Lucky Lady, reported to have engine failure off the entrance to Queenborough Harbour. They were actually found aground off Deadman's Island. Deadman's Island is basically a prohibited area. It's where most of the Napoleonic French prisoners are buried, and at low water all their coffins are exposed, so you can see all the bones. My colleagues and the crew, the lifeboat crew, tried to persuade the two occupants to come off the craft, but they refused and remained on board, and little else that could be done. We all returned to station, and they've obviously waited till they floated again. And that is the incident so far to date, Daniel.
Well, one of the things we always do is we cover a little brain teaser, just kind of something to get you thinking, really.
As I mentioned, newtons, buoyancy is measured in newtons, and you can have life jackets and buoyancy aids, which are 50 newtons, 100 newtons, 150 newtons, and 275 newtons. Now, life jackets and buoyancy aids are sold throughout Europe, and they should now meet the international standard of ISO 12402. And basically that standard covers 4 basic levels of buoyancy and uses the same pictograms. These are little pictures on the so everyone can actually look at the pictures without having to learn the languages across different countries. So a 50 Newton buoyancy aid is recommended for dinghy, kayak, windsurfing and personal watercraft users. It does not have sufficient buoyancy to protect a person who is unable to help themselves, and is unlikely to turn a person from face down position in the water and turn them upright. Now, a 100 Newton buoyancy aid life jacket is recommended for those in sheltered and calmer waters. It is tended for those who may have to wait for rescue but are likely to do so in calm conditions. It may not have sufficient buoyancy to protect a person who is unable to help themselves and may not roll an unconscious person onto their back, particularly if they're wearing heavy clothing. A 150 Newton life jacket is recommended for general use on coastal inshore waters when sailing, motorboating and fishing. It is intended for general offshore and rough weather use where a high standard of performance is required. It should turn an unconscious person onto their back and requires no subsequent action by the wearer to keep their face out of the water. However, its performance may be affected if the user is wearing heavy or waterproof clothing. A 275 Newton life jacket is recommended for offshore cruising, fishing and commercial users. It is intended primarily for extreme conditions and those wearing heavy protected clothing that may adversely affect the self-righting capacity of lower Newton related life jackets. This life jacket is designed to ensure that the wearer is floating in the correct position with their mouth and nose clear of the surface of the water. Now, the next point I'd like to make is, 2 points. Firstly, Newton ratings are relative to the weight of the intended user. So, for instance, a 150 Newton life jacket designed for a child will not float an adult. So you must get a 150 Newton life jacket designed for an adult's weight. And that applies for the 50, 100, 150 and 275. And you must make sure it fits correctly. The child must have a good fitting. You don't want it slipping off a child. So the next thing is to check your buoyancy aiding life jacket and have a look for those Newton ratings, and then ask yourself, is this sufficient for what use I'm going to use this for? And remember, 150 or larger life jacket is designed to turn an unconscious person facing up on entering the water. So, and a buoyancy aid is not guaranteed to do this. It is only an aid to keep you afloat. So a lot of people who wear these buoyancy aids think, well, I've got a life jacket on. No, you haven't. You've got a buoyancy aid on. Okay? And a buoyancy aid is best choice for those who expect to go in waters such as a dinghy sailor, water skiers, jet skiers, canoeists, windsurfers and kayakers. A life jacket is a better choice for those who plan to stay aboard for larger yachts, motor cruisers, angling and sports boats. So, check that particular life jackets and see what those ratings are. So, Daniel, all it left for me to say is thank you very much for bringing me on, asking me on this evening. I sure will be back early September, and I can tell all the listeners what Joe Public has been up to, and what they shouldn't have been up to during the summer with all those incidents. I absolutely guarantee that there'll be incidents involving inflatables and cliff, because people won't keep away from the cliffs. They'll fall off the cliffs. People won't take my advice about inflatables, and they'll get blown out to sea. Okay, cheerio all.
No, Ian, as always, thank you very much for coming along. We look forward to seeing you in September.
Thank you.